The scandal sheets called it the most devastating betrayal of the season. When Miss Eleanor Hartwell, a vicar's daughter of modest means, was accused of spreading vicious rumours about the Duke of Ashford's family, London society turned against her with merciless precision. Her name was dragged through the mud, her reputation shredded beyond repair. But what no one knew, what the Duke himself refused to believe, was that every whispered secret, every carefully planted lie, had been a desperate gambit to protect the one person he loved most in this world, his younger sister, Lady Catherine. And the truth, when it finally emerged, would shake the foundations of everything he thought he knew. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what part of the world you're listening from. I want to know how far this story has traveled. Eleanor Hartwell had learned long ago that gratitude was a currency far more valuable than gold in the drawing rooms of London's elite. Her father, the late Reverend Thomas Hartwell, had instilled in her the virtues of humility and service, and it was these qualities that had secured her position as companion to Lady Beatrice Worthington, a wealthy widow with connections that stretched into the highest echelons of society. The spring of 1815 had arrived with unusual warmth, and London was ablaze with anticipation for the season's most anticipated event, the Ashford Ball. The Duke of Ashford, at 28, was considered one of the most eligible bachelors in England, though his reputation for cold precision and exacting standards had earned him the sobriquet, the Iron Duke, among the ton. His ballroom would host 400 guests, and an invitation was more coveted than an audience with the Prince Regent himself. Eleanor stood in Lady Beatrice's morning room, the cream-coloured invitation card trembling slightly in her hands. The embossed crest of the Ashford family, a phoenix rising from flames, seemed to shimmer in the morning light streaming through the tall windows overlooking Berkeley Square. "You seem troubled, my dear," Lady Beatrice observed from her position by the fireplace, her keen grey eyes missing nothing. At 60, she possessed the sharp wit and observational skills that had made her one of society's most influential matrons. "I am merely surprised to be included, my lady," Eleanor replied, carefully setting the invitation on the mahogany writing desk. "Surely the Duke's ball is meant for people of consequence?" Lady Beatrice's laugh was warm but knowing. "My dear Eleanor, you have been my companion for 3 years. You have sat in drawing rooms with countesses, dined with viscounts, and held your own in conversations that would have reduced lesser women to stammering wrecks. You belong there as much as anyone." But Eleanor knew the truth. At 22, she was the daughter of a country vicar, educated beyond her station by her father's extensive library and her own voracious appetite for learning. Her modest inheritance had been carefully managed, allowing her a small independence, but nothing that would secure her future without employment. She was presentable, with chestnut hair that caught auburn highlights in certain light and grey-green eyes that her father had once called the colour of the sea before a storm. But she harboured no illusions about her place in this world. "I have heard," Eleanor ventured carefully, "that the Duke's sister will be making her debut this season." Lady Beatrice's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Lady Catherine Thornbury. Yes, she is 18 now, and it is past time she entered society. The Duke has been protective of her since their parents' deaths 5 years ago." There was something in Lady Beatrice's tone that made Eleanor pause, but her employer had already moved to the window, effectively closing the subject. The weeks leading to the ball passed in a flurry of preparations. Eleanor accompanied Lady Beatrice on social calls, where the conversation inevitably turned to speculation about the Duke and his sister. The whispers painted a picture of a young woman kept cloistered at the family's country estate, educated by governesses and tutors, but rarely seen in public. Some said she was sickly, others suggested she was too plain to be shown. Eleanor found herself oddly sympathetic to this unknown girl, trapped in a golden cage by a brother who controlled every aspect of her life. On the afternoon before the ball, Eleanor sat in the small room she occupied in Lady Beatrice's townhouse, carefully pressing the one evening gown she owned that might be suitable for such an occasion. It was a simple dress of pale blue silk, high-waisted in the current fashion, with modest embroidery at the hem. It had belonged to her mother, altered to fit Eleanor's taller, slimmer frame. A knock at the door interrupted her reverie. Lady Beatrice's lady's maid entered, carrying a wooden box. "Her ladyship asked me to bring you this," the woman said, setting the box on Eleanor's narrow bed. "She thought you might make use of it." Inside was a strand of pearls, simple, elegant, and undoubtedly valuable. A note in Lady Beatrice's hand read, "Every young woman deserves to feel beautiful at her first grand ball. These were my daughters. I think she would have wanted you to wear them." Eleanor's eyes stung with sudden tears. Lady Beatrice's only daughter had died of fever 10 years earlier, and the older woman rarely spoke of her. The gesture was one of profound kindness, and Eleanor felt the weight of it settle around her heart like a gentle embrace. The evening of the ball arrived with clear skies and a crescent moon hanging like a silver pendant above Mayfair. Lady Beatrice's carriage joined the long queue of vehicles delivering guests to Ashford House, a magnificent mansion on Grosvenor Square whose Palladian facade glowed with the light of 1,000 candles. Eleanor descended from the carriage, her heart beating an erratic rhythm against her ribs. The entrance hall was a marvel of white marble and gilt, with an enormous crystal chandelier casting prismatic light across the assembled guests. Footmen in the Ashford livery of midnight blue and silver moved with practiced efficiency, directing the flood of humanity toward the grand staircase. "Steady," Lady Beatrice murmured, linking her arm through Eleanor's. "Remember, you have every right to be here." But as they ascended the stairs toward the ballroom, Eleanor could not shake the feeling that she was stepping into a world where one misstep could mean ruin. She had no way of knowing how prophetic that instinct would prove to be, nor that within a fortnight her name would be synonymous with scandal and betrayal in every drawing-room in London. The Ashford Ballroom was a masterpiece of Regency grandeur, its ceiling adorned with frescoes depicting classical scenes of triumph and glory. 3 massive chandeliers hung like cascading stars, their light reflected in the mirrors that lined the walls, creating the illusion of infinite space. The orchestra, positioned in a gallery above, played a minuet with flawless precision. Eleanor stood near a column festooned with white roses and ivy, observing the spectacle with a mixture of awe and anthropological fascination. Lady Beatrice had been swept into conversation with the Duchess, leaving Eleanor momentarily alone, a position she neither minded nor sought to change. "You look as though you are cataloguing specimens rather than attending a ball." The voice came from her left, masculine and tinged with amusement. Eleanor turned to find a gentleman of perhaps 30 years regarding her with intelligent brown eyes. He was tall, well-formed, with dark hair and a face that was more interesting than handsome, the kind of face that suggested both humor and keen observation. "Is it so obvious?" Eleanor asked, unable to suppress a small smile. "Only to someone who does the same," he replied with a slight bow. "Dr. James Blackwood at your service. I'm the Duke's physician, though tonight I'm merely a reluctant guest who finds the study of human behavior far more engaging than dancing." "Miss Eleanor Hartwell," she responded, warming to his candor. "I am companion to Lady Beatrice Worthington." "Ah, yes, Lady Beatrice speaks highly of you. She says you have a mind that would shame half the gentlemen at Oxford." Before Eleanor could respond to this unexpected compliment, a sudden hush fell over the ballroom. The orchestra ceased mid-phrase, and every head turned toward the top of the grand staircase. The Duke of Ashford stood there, resplendent in black evening clothes that emphasized his considerable height and the breadth of his shoulders. His hair was dark as midnight, his features carved with aristocratic precision, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes of such piercing blue they seemed to see through flesh to bone. He was, Eleanor thought with detached observation, almost aggressively handsome, the kind of beauty that inspired both admiration and a faint sense of intimidation. But it was not the Duke who held Eleanor's attention. Beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, stood a young woman who could only be Lady Catherine Thornbury. She was exquisite, golden hair arranged in an elaborate coiffure, cornflower blue eyes that sparkled with what might have been excitement or anxiety, and a figure that the white silk of her gown displayed to considerable advantage. But there was something else. A fragility in the set of her shoulders, a brittleness in her smile that spoke of nerves stretched taut as violin strings. "The Duke's sister," Dr. Blackwood murmured beside Eleanor. "This is her first appearance in society. She seems frightened," Eleanor observed quietly. "You are perceptive." "Yes, Lady Catherine has been sheltered. His Grace is extraordinarily protective of her." The Duke and his sister descended into the ballroom, immediately surrounded by a swarm of well-wishers and sycophants. Eleanor watched as Lady Catherine's smile grew more fixed, her responses more mechanical. The Duke remained at her side, a forbidding presence that seemed to discourage any genuine approach. The evening progressed with the usual rhythm of such events: dancing, conversation, the careful navigation of social hierarchies. Eleanor declined 2 invitations to dance, preferring observation to participation. She noticed that Lady Catherine danced only with partners her brother explicitly approved, and that she never once left his immediate vicinity. It was near midnight when Eleanor stepped onto the terrace for fresh air. The night had grown warm with the press of bodies, and the scent of hothouse flowers had become cloying. She stood at the balustrade, breathing deeply of the cooler air, when she heard voices from the shadows beyond the terrace. "Please, I cannot do this any longer." The voice was young, female, and edged with desperation. "You must. There is no alternative." A male voice, urgent and pleading. Eleanor froze, caught between the impulse to announce her presence and the knowledge that any movement might embarrass the speakers. She recognized neither voice, but something in the raw emotion made her heart contract with sympathy. "He will find out. He knows everything, sees everything. You do not understand what he is capable of. Then we will leave. Tonight. I have everything arranged." "Stop!" The female voice broke on something between a laugh and a sob. "You speak of running away as though it were a simple thing. My brother controls my fortune, my movements, everything. I am not even permitted to choose my own gowns without his approval. How can we—" "Catherine, I love you. That is all that matters." "Lady Catherine." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. The young woman was here, in the shadows, with a man whose identity Eleanor could not discern. A clandestine meeting, possibly an elopement plot. Either would be catastrophic if discovered. "I love you too," Lady Catherine whispered, and the anguish in those words was palpable. "But love is not enough, not against him. He would hunt us to the ends of the earth, and when he found us he would destroy you utterly. I cannot bear that. I cannot be responsible for your ruin." "Then what are we to do?" "We must end this. Tonight. Please, you must go before someone sees us together." Eleanor heard movement, rapid footsteps retreating into the garden. She remained perfectly still, hoping the shadows would conceal her presence. After a long moment, Lady Catherine emerged onto the terrace, her face pale as alabaster in the moonlight, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Their eyes met. Eleanor saw the moment of recognition, the flash of panic, and then something else, a desperate, pleading hope. "You heard?" Lady Catherine said. It was not a question. "I did not mean to," Eleanor replied gently. "I came out for air and I—" "Will you tell him?" Catherine moved closer, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "Please, I am begging you. If my brother learns of this, he will— I do not know what he would do, but it would be terrible. Not just for me, but for the gentleman in question." Eleanor looked at this frightened young woman, at the desperation in her eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. She knew the weight of a protective older sibling. She had been one herself, though her younger brother had died of scarlet fever when he was only 12. She understood the cage of good intentions, the suffocation of being shielded from the world. "I will say nothing," Eleanor promised, "but Lady Catherine, if you are in some difficulty, if you need help—" "No, thank you, but no. This is my burden to bear. I only ask for your discretion." Catherine fled back into the ballroom before Eleanor could respond. Eleanor remained on the terrace, her mind churning with questions and concerns. She did not yet know that this moment, this promise of silence, would be the first link in a chain that would drag her down into scandal and ruin. 3 days later, the whispers began. Eleanor first heard them at a morning call with Lady Beatrice to Lady Pemberton's townhouse. The drawing-room fell silent when they entered, and the looks exchanged among the gathered ladies carried the unmistakable charge of scandal freshly unearthed. "My dear Lady Beatrice," Lady Pemberton said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "I am so sorry that you should learn of it in this manner, but I feel it is my duty to inform you that your companion has been named in connection with a most distressing matter." Eleanor's blood turned to ice. "I beg your pardon. The Duke of Ashford," Lady Pemberton continued, her eyes glittering with malicious pleasure, "has made it known that someone at his ball spread vicious lies about Lady Catherine, specifically that she has been carrying on an illicit romance with a most unsuitable gentleman. His Grace is conducting an investigation, and your name, Miss Hartwell, has been mentioned by several witnesses as someone who was seen speaking with Lady Catherine that evening and who afterward was overheard making speculative remarks about her behavior." The lie was so perfectly constructed, so plausible, that Eleanor felt the room tilt around her. "That is not true. I spoke with no one about Lady Catherine. I made no remarks of any kind." But the ladies' faces told her that her denial was futile. Someone had orchestrated this with diabolical precision, and Eleanor could not fathom who or why. Within a week, the full force of the scandal descended upon her. The Duke of Ashford himself called at Lady Beatrice's townhouse, his presence so commanding that the very air seemed to vibrate with his fury. Eleanor was summoned to the drawing-room, where she found the Duke standing before the fireplace, his tall form rigid with barely contained rage. His blue eyes, which had seemed merely cold at the ball, now blazed with something dark and dangerous. "Miss Hartwell," he said, his voice cutting like a blade through winter air, "you will explain to me why you have seen fit to destroy my sister's reputation with malicious gossip and slanderous speculation." "Your Grace, I have done no such thing. Do not compound your sin with lies." He took a step forward, and Eleanor instinctively stepped back. "I have testimony from multiple sources that you were overheard discussing Lady Catherine's supposed romantic entanglement. You were seen in conversation with her on the terrace. You then proceeded to spread these vicious falsehoods throughout London society. Your Grace, I spoke to no one. Whatever you have been told is false. I would never—" "You are a woman of no consequence, no family, no position," the Duke continued, his words falling like hammer blows. "You have sought to elevate yourself by dragging my sister's name through the mud. Perhaps you thought to make yourself interesting, to capture attention in a world that would otherwise overlook you entirely." Eleanor felt her face burn with humiliation and anger. "You are wrong, Your Grace, completely and utterly wrong." "Ah, I am never wrong," he replied with terrifying certainty. "And you, Miss Hartwell, will pay for what you have done. I will ensure that no respectable household in England will employ you. Your name will become synonymous with treachery and betrayal. You will be an outcast, shunned by society, your reputation in ruins. Consider it a mercy that I do not pursue legal action against you for slander." He turned and strode from the room, leaving Eleanor trembling with shock and disbelief. Lady Beatrice, who had witnessed the entire exchange, came to her side. "My dear girl, I do not believe these accusations for one moment," she said firmly, "but I fear the Duke's influence is such that—" "You must dismiss me," Eleanor said, her voice hollow. "If I remain in your employ, you will be tainted by association. I will not allow you to suffer for something I did not do." Lady Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. "You are asking me to abandon you? I am asking you to protect yourself. Please, my lady, I cannot bear to see you injured by this." Within a day, Eleanor had packed her few belongings and left Lady Beatrice's townhouse. The older woman pressed money into her hands, enough to secure modest lodgings and food for several months. But both women knew the gesture was a temporary reprieve rather than a solution. Eleanor took rooms in a respectable but unfashionable part of the city, where landladies asked few questions if the rent was paid promptly. She lay awake at night, trying to piece together the puzzle. Someone had deliberately framed her, but who and why? The only connection was that conversation on the terrace, those whispered words between Lady Catherine and her mysterious lover. And then, with a flash of terrible clarity, Eleanor understood. Lady Catherine had not betrayed her. Lady Catherine had been trying to protect her lover by creating a scandal that would divert attention away from him. If society believed Eleanor, a nobody, a companion with no powerful connections, had started malicious rumors, then any investigation would focus on Eleanor rather than on discovering the identity of Lady Catherine's secret romance. Eleanor was the sacrificial lamb, offered up to save someone Catherine loved. The realization should have filled Eleanor with rage. Instead, she felt a strange, cold determination settle over her. She had promised Catherine her discretion on that terrace. She had promised not to reveal what she had heard. And despite everything, despite the ruin, the humiliation, the destruction of her reputation, Eleanor found that promise still held. Because she understood something the Duke did not. Love could drive people to desperate measures. And sometimes, the greatest acts of love looked like betrayal. The boarding house on Montague Street was a far cry from Lady Beatrice's elegant townhouse, but Mrs. Abernathy, the landlady, was a woman of shrewd practicality, who cared more about prompt payment than social standing. Eleanor's room was on the third floor, small and sparsely furnished, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a writing desk positioned beneath the single window that overlooked the street below. 2 weeks after her exile from polite society, Eleanor sat at that desk, composing letters to former connections in search of employment. Teaching positions, companion roles, even governess work. She was willing to take anything that would provide income and a roof over her head. But each inquiry was met with silence or polite refusal. The Duke of Ashford's condemnation had reached far beyond London's drawing rooms. She had learned through Mrs. Abernathy, who collected gossip with the enthusiasm of a naturalist collecting specimens, that Lady Catherine had withdrawn from society immediately after the scandal, returning to the Ashford country estate in Derbyshire. The Duke remained in London, his presence at social events marked by an icy demeanour that discouraged any mention of his sister or the unfortunate affair. Eleanor found herself caught in a strange limbo. She was neither destitute nor secure, neither innocent in the public eye nor guilty in her own heart. The isolation pressed upon her like a physical weight, broken only by Mrs. Abernathy's occasional visits bearing tea and conversation. It was on a grey afternoon in early June when Eleanor received an unexpected caller. Mrs. Abernathy appeared at her door, slightly breathless from the 3 flights of stairs. "Miss Hartwell, there's a lady downstairs asking for you. Quite the fine lady, if I may say. Name of Lady Beatrice Worthington." Eleanor's heart leaped. She descended the stairs with as much dignity as the narrow passage allowed, entering the modest front parlour to find Lady Beatrice seated on the worn sofa, looking as incongruous as a peacock in a hen-house. "Lady Beatrice, you should not have come here. If anyone sees you—" "I am 60 years old, my dear, and have been a widow for 20 years. I shall call upon whomever I please." Lady Beatrice's voice was firm, but her eyes were concerned as they swept over Eleanor. "You look thin. Has Mrs. Abernathy been feeding you properly?" "I am well, my lady, but please, your reputation—" "My reputation is secure enough to weather association with you, whatever the Duke of Ashford might decree." Lady Beatrice opened her reticule and withdrew a folded letter. "This arrived for you at my house. I thought it might be important. Eleanor took the letter with trembling fingers. The paper was of good quality, the handwriting unfamiliar. She broke the plain wax seal and read, "Miss Hartwell, I believe we share an acquaintance in Lady Catherine Thornbury. I also believe that you have been gravely wronged. If you are willing to hear me out, I would be grateful for a meeting. I shall be at the British Museum, in the Room of Greek Antiquities, tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Come alone. A friend." Eleanor read the letter twice, her mind racing. This could be a trap. Someone seeking to further damage my reputation. Or it could be someone who knows the truth, Lady Beatrice observed. My dear, you have little left to lose, and you might gain much. The next afternoon found Eleanor walking through the imposing entrance of the British Museum, her heart beating rapidly beneath her modest grey walking dress. The museum was relatively empty on a weekday, with only a handful of scholars and enthusiasts wandering the echoing halls. The Greek Antiquities room was bathed in filtered light from the high windows. Eleanor entered, her footsteps muted on the stone floor, and stopped before a marble statue of Athena, goddess of wisdom and warfare. Miss Hartwell. She turned to find Dr. James Blackwood standing beside a display of Grecian urns. He looked different than he had at the ball, less polished, more tired, with shadows beneath his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "Dr. Blackwood, you wrote the letter." "I did. Thank you for coming." He glanced around the empty room, then moved closer, his voice dropping. "I could not risk sending something more explicit. The Duke has eyes and ears throughout the city. Why would you risk contacting me at all? You are his physician. His friend, I assume. I am his employee, and I was his father's friend before that, which is why I cannot stand by and watch him commit an injustice." Dr. Blackwood's expression was grave. "I know you did not spread those rumors, Miss Hartwell. I know because I know who did." Eleanor's breath caught. "Who?" "Lady Catherine herself." He held up a hand to forestall her protest. "Not the rumors about her supposed romance. Those were real enough, though the Duke remains ignorant of the gentleman's identity. No, the rumors about you being the source, about you being overheard making speculative remarks, those were started by Lady Catherine's lady's maid, on Lady Catherine's orders." The confirmation of what Eleanor had already suspected still hit her like a blow. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I have watched Lady Catherine become a shadow of herself, consumed by guilt over what she has done to you. Because I have watched the Duke destroy your life in pursuit of what he believes is justice, and because I know something that changes everything." Dr. Blackwood withdrew a packet of letters from his coat pocket. 3 days ago, Lady Catherine suffered a nervous collapse. I was summoned to the Derbyshire estate to attend her. In her delirium she spoke of things, terrible things that explained everything. He handed Eleanor the letters. These were written to Lady Catherine by Lord Marcus Fairchild, the second son of the Earl of Pemberton. They are love letters, Miss Hartwell, but they are also evidence of a far darker story. Eleanor opened the first letter with shaking hands. The words swam before her eyes. "My beloved Catherine, we shall be free of him soon. The poison is tasteless. He will never suspect." "Dear God," Eleanor whispered, "they were planning to murder the Duke?" "Not precisely. Lord Marcus was trying to convince Lady Catherine to help him poison her brother, claiming it was the only way they could be together. But Catherine, despite her desperation for freedom, could not bring herself to commit such an act. She confided in her maid, who saw an opportunity for blackmail. The maid threatened to reveal the letters to the Duke unless Catherine took certain actions, such as ruining my reputation to divert attention from the real scandal. Yes, if the Duke were to investigate Lady Catherine's connections, he might discover Lord Marcus. But if he believed the rumors were the malicious work of a dismissed companion, his investigation would focus elsewhere. You were sacrificed, Miss Hartwell, not by Lady Catherine's cruelty, but by her desperation. Eleanor sank onto a nearby bench, her mind reeling. And Lady Catherine's collapse? The guilt became unbearable. She confessed everything to me during her fever, begging me to find a way to clear your name. She gave me these letters as proof. Dr. Blackwood sat beside her. But here is where it becomes complicated. If I take these letters to the Duke, Lady Catherine will face his fury. He will know she was contemplating, however briefly, helping to murder him. He may never forgive her. He may even have her committed to an asylum for her own protection. You are asking me what to do. Eleanor looked at him in disbelief. Why would my opinion matter? Because you are the injured party. Because you alone have the moral authority to decide how this should be resolved. He met her eyes steadily. Lady Catherine is not a villain, Miss Hartwell. She is a young woman who has been controlled and confined to the point of breaking. She fell in love with the wrong man, and when that love threatened to destroy everything, she made a terrible choice. But she is also suffering tremendously for what she has done. Eleanor looked down at the letters in her hands, at the evidence that could restore her reputation and condemn Lady Catherine. She thought of that young woman on the terrace, tears streaming down her face, trapped by circumstances beyond her control. There must be another way, Eleanor said slowly. A way that exposes Lord Marcus as the true villain without destroying Lady Catherine utterly. Dr. Blackwood's expression brightened with something like hope. You would protect her, even after what she did to you? I would protect her from him, Eleanor corrected, gesturing to the letters. Lord Marcus tried to manipulate a vulnerable young woman into committing murder. He is the one who deserves to face justice. As for Lady Catherine, she needs help, not punishment. Then we must be clever about this. Strategic. Dr. Blackwood leaned forward. I have an idea, but it will require your cooperation and considerable courage on your part. Over the next hour, they formulated a plan. Eleanor would use the letters to approach Lord Marcus directly, threatening to expose him unless he confessed to starting the rumors about her. His confession would clear Eleanor's name and remove him as a threat to Lady Catherine, all without revealing the attempted murder plot. It was risky. Lord Marcus might simply deny everything, or worse, attempt to silence Eleanor permanently, but it was the best option they had. There is one more thing, Doctor, Blackwood said as they prepared to leave the museum. I have a sister, Mrs. Elizabeth Carrington, who lives in Bath. Her husband is a scholar of some renown, and they move in intellectual circles rather than fashionable ones. If you need a place to stay while this matter is resolved, somewhere away from London and the Duke's influence, I would be honored to facilitate an introduction. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes at this unexpected kindness. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. Because I am a physician, Miss Hartwell, and physicians are trained to recognize the difference between a symptom and a disease. The Duke saw you as the disease, the cause of all his troubles, but I see you as a symptom of a much deeper illness in that family, and until that illness is addressed, everyone will continue to suffer. 3 days later, Eleanor stood outside the Pemberton townhouse on Belgrave Square, the packet of letters concealed in her reticule. Lord Marcus had agreed to meet her, undoubtedly curious about what a disgraced companion could possibly want from him. She was shown to a study lined with books that had clearly never been read, their spines uncracked and arranged more for appearance than utility. Lord Marcus Fairchild entered a moment later, a handsome man of perhaps 26, with golden hair and the kind of easy charm that could be mistaken for depth by the unwary. Miss Hartwell, what an unexpected pleasure. His smile did not reach his eyes. I must confess, I am curious why you sought this meeting. Eleanor withdrew the letters and placed them on the desk between them. I have come to offer you a choice, Lord Marcus. You may confess to starting the rumors about me, clearing my name, and removing yourself from Lady Catherine's life permanently. Or I may take these letters to the Duke of Ashford and let him read how you attempted to convince his sister to murder him. The colour drained from Lord Marcus's face. Where did you get those? That is irrelevant. What matters is that I have them, and I am prepared to use them. You are bluffing. If you expose me, you expose Catherine as well. Perhaps. But I am already ruined, Lord Marcus. I have nothing more to lose. Can you say the same? Eleanor leaned forward. The Duke believes I destroyed his sister's reputation out of malice. What do you think he will do when he learns you tried to destroy his life? Lord Marcus's mask of charm cracked. You cannot prove I started those rumors. No, but I can prove you are a man of vicious character who attempted to manipulate a vulnerable young woman into patricide. Do you truly want to gamble that the Duke will not believe the rest once he sees what you are capable of? The silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Finally, Lord Marcus spoke, his voice bitter. What do you want me to do? Tomorrow you will go to the Duke and confess that you started the rumors about me in a misguided attempt to discredit Lady Catherine because she rejected your advances. You will paint yourself as a spurned suitor whose pride was injured. You will beg his forgiveness and mine, and then you will leave London and never contact Lady Catherine again. And in exchange, I will burn these letters and never speak of their contents to anyone. Eleanor stood. Do we have an agreement? Lord Marcus looked at the letters, then at Eleanor, his expression a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. You are more formidable than you appear, Miss Hartwell. I have had to be. Life has not offered me the luxury of weakness. She gathered the letters. I will return tomorrow evening for your answer. Choose wisely, Lord Marcus. Your future depends upon it. Eleanor left the townhouse with her heart pounding so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs. She had gambled everything on this confrontation, and now she could only wait to see if her bluff would hold. The morning light filtered through the narrow window of Eleanor's boarding-house room, casting pale geometric patterns across the floor. She had not slept, her mind too occupied with running through every possible outcome of yesterday's confrontation. Lord Marcus might confess. He might call her bluff. He might even attempt something more sinister to silence her permanently. At 9:30, a knock at her door jolted her from her restless vigil. Mrs. Abernathy stood in the hallway, her weathered face unusually animated. Miss Hartwell, there's a gentleman downstairs. Says his name is Dr. Blackwood and that it's urgent. Eleanor descended to find the physician pacing the cramped parlour, his expression grave. He turned as she entered, relief flooding his features. Thank God you're safe. I was half afraid Lord Marcus might have... He stopped himself. I come bearing news. This morning, Lord Marcus Fairchild appeared at the Duke's residence and confessed to everything. Well, not everything, he amended quickly, but enough. He claimed he had developed an infatuation with Lady Catherine at the ball, and when she rejected his advances, he sought revenge by creating rumors that would damage her reputation while framing you as the source. Eleanor sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. He actually did it. He had little choice. You gave him a way to salvage some dignity from this disaster, and he took it. Of course, his confession has caused its own scandal. The Pembertons are furious. Their son has been revealed as a liar and a cad. Lord Marcus has been sent to their Scottish estate in disgrace and forbidden from returning to London for at least 2 years. And Lady Catherine? Dr. Blackwood's expression softened. She remains at the Derbyshire estate. The Duke believes she was an innocent victim in all this, which in most ways she was. Her connection to Lord Marcus's scheme remains unknown, as does the content of those letters, which I will burn, as promised. You are remarkably merciful, Miss Hartwell. Eleanor thought of that young woman on the terrace, trapped by circumstances and her own desperation. I am pragmatic, Dr. Blackwood. Revenge would satisfy my wounded pride, but it would not restore my reputation. And it would destroy a young woman who has already suffered greatly. Speaking of your reputation, the Duke has sent for you. Eleanor's eyes widened. Sent for me? He wishes to make amends, publicly. I believe he intends to issue a statement clearing your name and acknowledging that you were wrongly accused. Dr. Blackwood handed her a card. You are invited to call upon him this afternoon at 3 o'clock. The hours until 3 o'clock passed with agonizing slowness. Eleanor borrowed a better dress from Mrs. Abernathy's niece, a blue muslin day dress that was only slightly outdated, and arranged her hair with shaking hands. She had no idea what to expect from this meeting, only that it would determine the course of her future. The Ashford residence on Grosvenor Square was even more imposing by daylight, its Portland stone facade gleaming in the afternoon sun. A footman admitted Eleanor and led her to a study that overlooked the square, its walls lined with books and maps that suggested a mind engaged with both history and geography. The Duke stood at the window, his tall frame silhouetted against the light. He turned as she entered, and Eleanor was struck by the change in him. The icy fury that had characterized their previous encounter had been replaced by something more complex. Regret, perhaps, or shame. "Miss Hartwell, thank you for coming." His voice was formal, carefully controlled. "Your Grace." Eleanor remained near the door, uncertain of the proper protocol for a meeting such as this. "Please, sit." He gestured to a chair near the fireplace. After a moment's hesitation, Eleanor complied. The Duke did not sit, but instead remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back. "I owe you an apology of such magnitude that words seem inadequate to convey it," he began. "I wronged you terribly. I allowed my rage and my protective instincts toward my sister to override reason and justice. I accused you of malicious falsehood when you were entirely innocent. I used my influence to destroy your livelihood and your reputation. There is no excuse for what I did." Eleanor listened in silence, unsure how to respond to this formal contrition. "Lord Marcus Fairchild confessed to me this morning that he was the source of the rumors, and that he deliberately framed you to divert suspicion from himself. He will be dealt with appropriately. His family has already moved to contain the damage to their name, and he will not be welcome in London society for some considerable time. I am glad the truth has emerged, Your Grace. I've prepared a statement to be published in the Times and circulated among society, making it clear that you were entirely blameless and that I acted precipitously in my condemnation of you. Additionally, I wish to offer you compensation for the wages and opportunities you lost due to my actions." He withdrew a bank draft from his desk and handed it to her. Eleanor looked at the sum and felt her breath catch. It was enough to support her comfortably for 2 years, possibly longer if managed carefully. "Your Grace, this is too much. It is insufficient," he interrupted. "But it is what I can offer immediately. I have also written letters of reference on your behalf, should you seek new employment, and have spoken with Lady Beatrice about reinstating you as her companion, if that is your wish." Eleanor looked down at the bank draft, at this tangible evidence of the Duke's remorse. A month ago, she would have been overjoyed by such an offer. Now, holding it in her hands, she felt strangely empty. "May I speak plainly, Your Grace?" A flicker of surprise crossed his aristocratic features. "Please do." "An apology, no matter how sincere, cannot undo the damage that was done. You used your power to crush someone you perceived as beneath you, without proper investigation or consideration for the truth. You were judge, jury, and executioner, and your certainty of your own rightness made you cruel. This money," she gestured to the bank draft, "is welcome, and I thank you for it. But it does not change the fact that you destroyed my life on the basis of rumor and speculation." The Duke's jaw tightened. "You are correct. I acted abominably." "And what of Lady Catherine?" Eleanor asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "What have you learned from this experience about how you treat your sister?" "I beg your pardon?" Eleanor stood, meeting his gaze directly. "Your Grace, I was on the terrace the night of your ball. I heard Lady Catherine speaking with someone in the garden. I heard her desperation, her sense of being trapped. She spoke of you as though you were a jailer rather than a brother." The Duke's expression darkened dangerously. "You overstepped, Miss Hartwell. You asked me to speak plainly, so I shall. Lady Catherine became entangled with Lord Marcus, not because she is foolish or wicked, but because she is starving for freedom and agency. You have kept her cloistered and controlled, making decisions for her as though she were a child. Is it any wonder she sought connection with someone, anyone, who offered her a different future? I protected her. You imprisoned her! Eleanor's voice rose, all the anger and frustration of the past weeks pouring out. You wrapped your protection around her like chains and called it love. And when someone threatened that control, you lashed out with such violence that an innocent person's life was destroyed. Your sister does not need a more vigilant jailer, Your Grace. She needs a brother who trusts her to make her own choices, even if those choices include mistakes. The silence that followed was deafening. The Duke stared at her, his blue eyes blazing with emotions Eleanor could not fully decipher. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and tightly controlled. You are either extraordinarily brave or extraordinarily foolish to speak to me in such a manner. I am neither brave nor foolish. I am simply someone who has nothing left to lose. Eleanor lifted her chin. You cannot destroy my reputation twice, Your Grace. To her complete surprise, the Duke laughed, a short, sharp sound without humor. You remind me of someone. My mother, perhaps. She was the only person who ever dared to tell my father when he was being an arrogant fool. He moved to the window, staring out at the square below. You are not wrong in your assessment. I have been overly protective of Catherine since our parents died. She was only 13, still a child, and I was terrified of failing her. Every decision I made was designed to keep her safe, to shield her from the dangers and disappointments of the world. But in doing so, I may have created a different kind of danger. It is not too late to change course, Eleanor said more gently. Lady Catherine is 18. She is young, but she is not a child. Allow her to breathe. Allow her to make choices. Guide her, certainly, but do not cage her. The Duke turned back to face her. You are remarkable, Miss Hartwell. Most people in your position would be focused solely on their own grievances and rightful compensation. Yet you use this opportunity to advocate for my sister, despite what she inadvertently cost you. I advocate for her because I understand her position. I, too, have experienced what it is to be powerless, to have one's future decided by others, to be judged and condemned without recourse. Eleanor paused. The difference is that Lady Catherine has a brother who loves her, even if his methods are flawed. She has the possibility of a different future if you are willing to grant it to her. The Duke studied her with an intensity that made Eleanor feel as though he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Dr. Blackwood was right about you. He said you possessed an unusual combination of intelligence and compassion, and that I would do well to listen to what you had to say. Doctor, Blackwood is a wise man. Indeed. The Duke moved back to his desk, his expression thoughtful. Miss Hartwell, I have a proposition for you. It may seem strange given the circumstances, but hear me out. Eleanor tensed, unsure what to expect. Lady Catherine requires a companion, someone closer to her own age, someone with sense and integrity, someone who will not simply defer to my wishes, but will advocate for Catherine's best interests. Would you consider taking such a position? Eleanor stared at him in shock. You cannot be serious. I am entirely serious. You have demonstrated courage, discretion, and a genuine concern for my sister's well-being. Those are qualities I value far more than social standing or connections. Your Grace, I am the woman you publicly destroyed, not a month ago. The scandal will be overcome by my public restoration of your reputation, and by the fact that I, the Duke of Ashford, have chosen you for this position. If I say you are worthy of trust and respect, society will eventually agree. It may take time, but it will happen. Eleanor's mind raced. The offer was extraordinary, not just employment, but employment in one of the most prestigious households in England. It would restore her reputation, provide financial security, and give her the opportunity to help Lady Catherine navigate toward a freer future. But it would also mean living under the Duke's roof, subject to his authority, working for the man who had so casually destroyed her life. I need time to consider this, Eleanor said finally. It is a generous offer, but given our history, you must understand my hesitation. Of course. Take whatever time you need. The Duke withdrew a card and handed it to her. Dr. Blackwood tells me you may be traveling to Bath to visit his sister. I think that is an excellent idea. You have been through a tremendous ordeal, and some distance from London would do you good. When you return, if you are interested in the position, send word, and we will discuss terms. Eleanor took the card, her fingers brushing his briefly. Even through her gloves, she felt the warmth of his hand, the strength in those long fingers. Thank you, Your Grace. For the apology, the compensation, and the offer, I will consider it carefully. As Eleanor left the Ashford residence, the bank draft secure in her reticule, she felt as though she was standing at a crossroads. One path led back to her old life, back to being Lady Beatrice's companion, invisible and safe. The other path led into unknown territory, toward a future that included the formidable Duke and his troubled sister. She did not yet know which path she would choose. But for the first time since the scandal began, Eleanor Hartwell felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The journey to Bath took 2 days by post-chaise, and Eleanor found herself grateful for the enforced solitude. The rolling hills of the English countryside provided a balm to her frayed nerves, and the rhythmic movement of the carriage allowed her thoughts to settle into some semblance of order. Dr. Blackwood's sister, Elizabeth Carrington, proved to be a revelation. Where Eleanor had expected someone similar to the physician, measured, scientific, reserved, Elizabeth was warm, effusive, and disarmingly frank. She welcomed Eleanor to her townhouse on the Royal Crescent with genuine enthusiasm, her dark curls bouncing as she swept Eleanor into an embrace. "My brother has told me everything," Elizabeth declared, leading Eleanor into a bright drawing room decorated in cheerful yellows and greens. "And I must say, you have conducted yourself with remarkable dignity throughout this entire awful business. The Duke should count himself fortunate that you are even considering his offer." Eleanor found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. "Your brother has been extraordinarily kind to me. James is a good man, though far too serious for his own good. He needs someone to make him laugh occasionally, but he persists in surrounding himself with medical journals and melancholic aristocrats." Elizabeth poured tea with practiced efficiency. "Now you must tell me everything, not the sanitized version James provided, but the real story, with all the messy emotional bits included." Over the next several days, Eleanor found herself drawn into the Carringtons' world. Elizabeth's husband, Professor Thomas Carrington, was a scholar of ancient languages who possessed the absent-minded charm of a man more comfortable with dead civilizations than living society. Their home was filled with books, papers, and lively conversation about topics ranging from Egyptian hieroglyphics to the latest political developments in Parliament. Eleanor discovered a freedom here she had never experienced before. In London, even as Lady Beatrice's companion, she had been constantly aware of her precarious position, always guarding her words and actions. In Bath, among the Carringtons and their intellectual friends, she could speak her mind without fear of censure. She debated philosophy with a visiting Cambridge don, discussed literature with a blue-stocking poet, and found herself laughing, genuinely laughing, at Thomas's terrible puns about Greek mythology. It was during her second week in Bath that Elizabeth broached the subject Eleanor had been avoiding. They were walking in Sydney Gardens, the morning sun filtering through the trees in dappled patterns. Elizabeth had been unusually quiet, and Eleanor sensed she was choosing her words carefully. "Have you decided what you will do?" Elizabeth asked finally. "About the Duke's offer?" Eleanor watched a pair of swans gliding across the ornamental lake. "I am torn. The practical part of me knows it is an excellent position, far better than I could expect given my circumstances. But the emotional part of me recoils at the idea of working for a man who treated me so terribly." "Those are both valid perspectives," Elizabeth said. "But may I offer a third? Please do. You have an opportunity to change someone's life, not just Lady Catherine's, though certainly hers as well, but the Duke himself." Elizabeth stopped walking, turning to face Eleanor. James says the Duke was profoundly shaken by his conversation with you, that your words about how he has treated his sister struck something deep within him. Most people in the Duke's position go through life never having their assumptions challenged, never having to confront the harm their certainty can cause. You did that for him, and he listened. So I should take the position out of altruism to help reform a man who destroyed my reputation? No, Elizabeth said firmly. You should take it because it gives you power. Right now, you are still defined by what happened to you. You are the woman the Duke wronged. If you take this position, you become the woman who rose above that wrong, who chose forgiveness and purpose over bitterness and retreat. You control your own narrative rather than letting others control it for you. Eleanor had not considered it from that angle. You have a devious mind, Mrs. Carrington. I prefer to think of it as strategic, Elizabeth smiled. Also, James mentioned the salary the Duke is offering. With that kind of financial security, you could save enough over a few years to establish true independence. You could open a school, travel, write, whatever you wish. The position is not a prison sentence. It is a means to an end. That evening, Eleanor sat at the writing desk in her guest room, a sheet of paper before her. She wrote 3 different letters to the Duke, each expressing a different decision. Finally, she settled on the truth as she understood it. Your Grace, I have given considerable thought to your offer of a position as companion to Lady Catherine. I accept with the following conditions. First, that I shall have direct authority over Lady Catherine's social education and introduction to society, without interference, unless I specifically request your input, or unless Lady Catherine's safety is genuinely at risk. Second, that I shall be permitted to continue my own education and intellectual pursuits, including access to your library and the freedom to correspond with scholarly acquaintances. Third, that this arrangement shall be reviewed after 1 year, at which point either of us may terminate the agreement if it proves unsatisfactory. I am not accepting this position solely for financial security, though I acknowledge its importance. I am accepting because I believe Lady Catherine deserves the opportunity to discover who she is beyond the confines of your protection, and because I believe you deserve the opportunity to learn what it means to trust someone you love. I shall return to London next week and will present myself at your residence at your convenience. Respectfully, Miss Eleanor Hartwell. She sealed the letter before she could second-guess herself and posted it the following morning. The Duke's response arrived 3 days later, brief but cordial. He agreed to her conditions and looked forward to her return to London. Eleanor's final evening in Bath was marked by a small dinner party the Carringtons hosted in her honour. The conversation flowed as freely as the wine, and Eleanor found herself surrounded by people who valued her for her mind and character rather than her social standing. You must promise to write, Elizabeth insisted, as they said their farewells the next morning, and to visit whenever you need refuge from the intensity of the Ashford household. I promise, Eleanor said, embracing her new friend warmly. Thank you for showing me that there is life beyond society's narrow judgments. The journey back to London felt different than her departure. Eleanor watched the countryside roll past with a sense of purpose rather than desperation. She was not returning as a supplicant or a victim, but as a woman with agency and a position of influence, however unconventional. The Ashford residence looked different too, now that she was approaching it not as an accused criminal, but as an employee. A housekeeper named Mrs. Winters greeted her warmly and showed her to rooms on the 2nd floor, a bedroom and small sitting room that were far more luxurious than anything Eleanor had ever occupied. His Grace is in his study, Mrs. Winters said. He asked that you join him there when you are settled. Eleanor unpacked quickly, changed into a fresh dress, and made her way downstairs. She paused outside the study door, gathering her courage, then knocked firmly. Enter. The Duke sat behind his desk, papers spread before him. He rose as she entered, and Eleanor was struck again by his commanding presence. The height, the aristocratic features, the eyes that seemed to see too much. Miss Hartwell, welcome. His voice was formal but not cold. I trust your journey was comfortable. Very much so, Your Grace. Thank you for honoring my conditions. They were reasonable conditions, sensibly argued. I would be foolish to refuse them. He gestured to a chair. There are matters we should discuss before you meet with Catherine. Eleanor sat, folding her hands in her lap. I am listening. Catherine does not yet know you will be her companion. I thought it best if I introduced you together, and you could decide how to proceed from there. The Duke paused, his expression troubled. She has been fragile since returning from London. The scandal with Lord Marcus affected her deeply, though she will not speak of it directly. Dr. Blackwood has been attending her, but he believes what she needs most is companionship and understanding. I will do my best to provide both. I know you will. The Duke met her eyes steadily. Miss Hartwell, I want to be clear about something. I hired you not just for Catherine's sake, but for my own education. You were right when you said I had been a jailer rather than a brother. I do not know how to change that pattern, but I am willing to learn. I ask for your patience as I do. Eleanor felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the foundation upon which forgiveness could eventually be built. That is all anyone can ask, Your Grace. He stood. Come then, let me introduce you to your new charge. Lady Catherine's rooms were in the east wing, overlooking the gardens. The Duke knocked gently before entering, and Eleanor followed him into a sitting room decorated in soft blues and creams. Lady Catherine sat by the window, a book forgotten in her lap. She looked up as they entered, and Eleanor saw that the vibrant young woman from the ball had been replaced by someone pale and hollow-eyed, as though grief had carved away some essential vitality. Catherine, the Duke said gently, I have brought someone to meet you. This is Miss Eleanor Hartwell. She has agreed to be your companion. Catherine's eyes widened with shock, then filled with tears. Miss Hartwell. Oh God, after what I do not deserve. Eleanor moved forward quickly, kneeling beside Catherine's chair and taking her cold hands. Hush. What's past is past. I am here now, and I hope we might become friends. But I ruined your life, Catherine's voice broke. I allowed terrible things to be said about you. I stood by while you suffered for something you did not do. You were in an impossible situation, manipulated by people who should have known better. I understand that, Lady Catherine, and I forgive you. Eleanor squeezed her hands gently. Now the question is whether you can forgive yourself. Catherine looked at her brother, then back at Eleanor, her expression a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. Why would you come here? Why would you help me after everything? Because holding on to anger would hurt me more than it would hurt anyone else. And because I believe you deserve the chance to discover who you are beyond this scandal. Eleanor smiled. Besides, your brother has agreed to let me have complete authority over your social rehabilitation. That means we get to plan how to reintroduce you to society on your terms, not anyone else's. For the first time, something like interest sparked in Catherine's eyes. My terms? Your terms, within reason, of course. But yes, you should have a say in how your life unfolds. Catherine looked at her brother, who nodded. Miss Hartwell and I have discussed this. You will have considerably more freedom than before, Catherine, but you must promise to be honest with us about what you want and need. I promise, Catherine whispered, tears still streaming down her face. I promise. As Eleanor sat with Lady Catherine, discussing plans for the coming weeks, she caught the Duke watching them from his position by the door. His expression was complex, relief, perhaps, mixed with something that might have been gratitude or even admiration. Their eyes met across the room, and for a brief moment, Eleanor felt an unexpected connection, as though they were partners in some grand endeavor rather than employer and employee. Then the Duke inclined his head slightly and left, closing the door softly behind him. Eleanor turned her attention back to Catherine, but she could not quite shake the strange warmth that had bloomed in her chest at that shared glance. She told herself it was simply satisfaction at having made the right decision, nothing more. But deep down, in a place she was not yet ready to examine, Eleanor knew it was something more complicated than that. 6 months had passed since Eleanor Hartwell had taken up residence at Ashford House, and London had reluctantly amended its opinion of her. The Duke's public restoration of her reputation, combined with his conspicuous support, had forced society to reconsider its previous condemnation. It helped that Lady Catherine, under Eleanor's guidance, had blossomed into one of the season's most engaging young women, witty without being sharp, beautiful without being vain, and possessed of a refreshing honesty that charmed even the most cynical observers. The transformation had not been instantaneous or easy. Catherine had struggled with guilt and anxiety for months, and there had been several difficult conversations about trust, forgiveness, and the nature of genuine freedom versus reckless abandon. But gradually, with Eleanor's steady support and the Duke's painful efforts to loosen his grip on his sister's life, Catherine had begun to emerge from her chrysalis. Now, in the drawing room of Ashford House on a crisp October afternoon, Eleanor watched with quiet satisfaction as Catherine entertained a small gathering of friends, genuine friends she had chosen herself, including a bookish baronet's daughter, a diplomat's witty niece, and a shy viscount's sister who shared Catherine's love of music. "You have worked miracles," a voice said beside her. Eleanor turned to find Dr. Blackwood standing there, teacup in hand, his expression warm. "When I compare the frightened young woman I attended 6 months ago to the confident lady holding court over there, I can scarcely believe they are the same person." "Catherine did the difficult work herself," Eleanor demurred. "I merely provided a safe space for her to grow." "You are too modest. His Grace certainly does not share your assessment. I have never seen him so willing to acknowledge his own failings, and I believe that is entirely due to your influence." Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks. Her relationship with the Duke had evolved in unexpected ways over the past months. They had established a pattern of weekly meetings where they discussed Catherine's progress, but these conversations had gradually expanded to include other topics: books they had read, political developments, philosophical questions about duty and happiness. She had discovered that beneath his intimidating exterior, the Duke possessed a keen intellect and a dry wit that could make her laugh unexpectedly. "Speaking of His Grace," Dr. Blackwood continued, "I believe he wishes to speak with you. He is in the library." Eleanor found the Duke standing before the tall windows that overlooked the garden, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture she had come to recognize as indicating deep thought. He turned as she entered, and she was struck, as she always was, by the intensity of his regard. "Miss Hartwell, thank you for coming." He gestured to the chairs by the fireplace. "I hope I am not interrupting your afternoon." "Not at all, Your Grace. Catherine is well occupied with her friends, and they do not require my supervision." They sat, and Eleanor waited for him to speak. She had learned that the Duke, despite his commanding presence, sometimes needed time to gather his thoughts on personal matters. "I wanted to discuss the approaching conclusion of your trial year," he said finally. "Our agreement specified that either of us could terminate the arrangement if it proved unsatisfactory." Eleanor's heart sank. Despite the progress they had made, perhaps the Duke had decided she was no longer necessary. "I see. I wish to propose a different arrangement entirely." The Duke leaned forward, his blue eyes intent. "Miss Hartwell, Eleanor, if I may, these past 6 months have been extraordinary. Catherine has thrived under your guidance in ways I could not have imagined. But more than that, you have changed the very atmosphere of this household. You have taught me what it means to truly listen, to value someone's perspective even when it challenges my own assumptions. You have made me a better brother, and I dare hope, a better man." Eleanor's breath caught. "Your Grace, Alexander. My given name is Alexander, and I would be honored if you would use it, at least in private." He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small box. "I am making an extraordinary request, and I ask that you hear me out before responding. He opened the box to reveal a ring, not ostentatious, but undeniably beautiful, with a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds that caught the firelight. "I am asking you to marry me." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Eleanor stared at the ring, then at the Duke, at Alexander, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. "I know this seems sudden," he continued, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "But it is not sudden for me. I have been thinking about this for months, questioning whether what I felt was gratitude or something deeper. I have concluded it is the latter. You challenge me, Eleanor. You make me think, make me question my assumptions, make me want to be worthy of your respect. You are brilliant, compassionate, brave, and utterly unique. I would count myself the most fortunate man in England if you would agree to be my wife." Eleanor's mind raced. This was impossible. She was a vicar's daughter, a former companion. He was a duke, one of the most powerful men in England. The scandal their union would cause. "I can see you cataloguing all the reasons this cannot work," Alexander said with a slight smile. "The difference in our stations, the potential scandal, the complication with Catherine. But consider this. We have already survived one enormous scandal together. We have proven that we work well as partners, that we respect each other's judgment. As for the difference in our stations," he shrugged, "I am a duke. I can marry whomever I wish, and society will eventually accept it because they have no choice. But Catherine will be delighted. I have already spoken with her about my intentions, and she gave her wholehearted blessing. In fact, she said, and I quote, 'If you do not marry Eleanor, I shall never forgive you because she is the best thing that has ever happened to this family.'" Despite herself, Eleanor laughed. "She did not say that. She absolutely did." Alexander's expression grew more serious. "I am not asking you to give up your independence or your pursuits. I am asking you to share my life while continuing to live your own. You could establish the school you have spoken of, wanting to create or write or pursue whatever intellectual interests you wish. You would have resources and freedom, and a partner who admires you beyond measure." Eleanor looked at this man, who 6 months ago had been her greatest enemy, and saw instead someone who had been willing to examine his own faults, to change, to grow. She thought of the conversations they had shared, the moments of unexpected laughter, the growing sense of partnership that had developed between them. "I am frightened," she admitted quietly. "What if I fail to live up to the expectations of being a duchess? What if—" "Then we will face those challenges together, as we have faced everything else." Alexander took her hand gently. "Eleanor, I am not asking you to be perfect. I am asking you to be yourself, which is more than sufficient." Eleanor looked down at their joined hands, at the ring that represented not just a proposal, but a promise of genuine partnership. She thought of the girl she had been 6 months ago, broken and alone in a boarding house. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, through scandal and redemption, through pain and unexpected grace. "Yes," she said, meeting his eyes. "Yes, I will marry you." The smile that broke across Alexander's face was transformative, erasing years of stern reserve and revealing the man beneath the ducal mask. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. "I promise you will not regret this," he said softly. "I am counting on it," Eleanor replied. And then, because the moment seemed to demand it, she leaned forward and kissed him gently. The wedding took place 2 months later, in December, at the Ashford Chapel on the family's Derbyshire estate. It was a relatively private affair by ducal standards, only 200 guests, including Lady Beatrice, the Carringtons, and a host of Eleanor's new friends from London's intellectual circles. Catherine served as Eleanor's attendant, her joy evident in every smile. As Eleanor walked down the aisle on Lady Beatrice's arm, the older woman had insisted on giving her away, saying, "I may not be family by blood, but I claim you by affection." She looked at Alexander waiting at the altar and felt a profound sense of rightness. This was not the life she had imagined for herself, but it was perhaps better than anything she could have imagined. The ceremony was traditional, the vows spoken with sincerity and witnessed by those who had supported them through scandal and transformation. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, Eleanor felt the weight of her past fall away, replaced by the promise of a future she would help shape. The breakfast that followed was filled with laughter and toasts. Dr. Blackwood gave a speech that had everyone alternately crying and laughing. Elizabeth Carrington embarrassed her brother thoroughly with stories from Eleanor's time in Bath, and Catherine, her eyes shining with happiness, declared that she had gained not just a sister, but a true friend. That evening, as Eleanor stood on the terrace of Ashford Manor looking out over the snow-dusted gardens, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. A year ago, she had been destroyed by scandal, her life in ruins, her future bleak. Now she was the Duchess of Ashford, married to a man who valued her mind as much as her heart, poised to use her position to create opportunities for other young women through the school she was already planning. Alexander joined her on the terrace, slipping an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking?" "That sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the catalyst for the best things." Eleanor leaned into his warmth. "If Lord Marcus had not framed me, if you had not wrongly condemned me, none of this would have happened. We would have remained strangers passing in the night." Fate has a strange sense of humor. Or perhaps, Eleanor said thoughtfully, it is simply that people have an extraordinary capacity for growth and change if they are willing to be uncomfortable long enough to achieve it. Alexander pressed a kiss to her temple. "You are far too philosophical for a wedding night." Eleanor laughed. "I am a duchess now. I shall be philosophical whenever I please." "That," Alexander said, turning her to face him, his eyes warm with love and amusement, "is precisely what I'm counting on." As they stood together in the winter darkness, Eleanor Hartwell, now Eleanor Thornbury, Duchess of Ashford, thought of that frightened young woman she had been, and of the butterfly she had become. She thought of Lady Catherine, safe and thriving. She thought of Alexander, transformed from enemy to partner. And she thought of the future stretching before them, full of possibility and promise. She had bloomed, not despite being planted in difficult soil, but because of it. And in doing so, she had helped others bloom as well. That, Eleanor thought, was perhaps the greatest achievement of all. Not just surviving adversity, but using it to create something beautiful and true. The story of the woman the Duke believed had ruined his name, only to discover she had saved far more than his sister, had reached its conclusion. But the story of Eleanor and Alexander, of partnership and possibility, of love built on respect and mutual transformation, was just beginning. And it promised to be extraordinary. Before we say goodbye, if you enjoyed this journey through Regency England and Eleanor's remarkable transformation, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. I'd also love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Drop a comment and tell me how far this story has traveled. Your engagement helps me bring more stories like this to life. Thank you for listening, and until next time, remember, sometimes our greatest trials become our greatest triumphs.